What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they head into mandatory minicamp this week. The first time we will see all 90 guys on the field together. Plenty to talk about, plenty of action ahead of us, but a busy weekend for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Some headlines being made. A former Pittsburgh Steelers running back making all the noise, calling out one of the greatest boxers of all time. And then a former Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback calls it quits after 9 seasons in the NFL. We're going to dive into both of those, but more importantly, some more conversations about what this team is, where this team can go, and what we have taken away from the Pittsburgh Steelers to this point. It's been a beautiful weekend here in the Burgh. I've gotten into the routine of golfing on Sunday nights. Sunday night at about 6:30, I shut it all down. I go out, hit the golf course by myself, quick 45-minute round out there. And I won't lie to you. It has, maybe it's just me, but I have become 10 times the person I believe I was in the last 4 weeks doing this, just because you can't be mad on a golf course unless you're mad at your own shot. And if you're playing by yourself, there is not just one shot. When you hit a bad shot, you just simply drop another ball. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling good. I'm impressed by that 45-minute, I assume 9 holes, but still 45 minutes
9 holes,
to get through 9 holes. That's not easy to do. That must have been a pretty good round. Or
we're moving quick. Dropping a lot. We're not looking in the woods. We're not searching for balls here. This is, we're beating the sun coming down, and we're 6:30 trying to be home before like 8:30 so that we could, you got to drive there. You got to come back. So you're teeing off at like 7. It's not bad. Yesterday was a bit longer. Sometimes you get stuck behind like a crowd and you're like, come on, dude. Like, I'm one guy. There's nothing worse. And I'm sure a lot of people on this listening right now will know. There's nothing worse than somebody that's in front of you that you should be playing through. You know that they should let you go ahead and they don't the whole time. And you're like, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, pal, but I can't play any slower. There's just nothing I could do. I've already smoked a cigar. I'm 2 beers deep at this point. Like, it's 9 holes. This is supposed to be quick. That's how it was yesterday. I came home at about 8:45. Had a cold dinner sitting there, and it was nice. It was still worth it. So 45 minutes, yeah. His Mark Wahlberg, and his did you ever see his morning schedule?
The one where he'd wake up at 3 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, he golfs. He golfs in that schedule, and it's. I think it's 1 hour. I think he's got 1 hour to hit 18 holes, something crazy like that. And people say that they've done it, so I'm good. I can't do that. We're trying though.
I'm not basing anything in my life off of what Mark Wahlberg does, though. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't think that's good advice for anyone.
No, anybody who's waking up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning and not going to bed. If I woke up at 2:30, I'd be in bed for about 5 o'clock, about maybe 5:30 in the afternoon, because I got to wake up at 2 o'clock the next day. So not happening. All right, let's talk about some news and notes. Pittsburgh Steelers had a bit of a busy weekend. The first one started with former Pittsburgh Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell shooting his shot. Mike Tyson announced the new date with boxer, TikTok influencer, whatever you want to call him, Jake Paul, on November 15th. And Le'Veon Bell quote tweeted the tweet and made it very clear. Mike, spar me. All caps. I mean, I think everybody had the same reaction. I'm going to ask you yours. When you saw this, Mike Tyson, one of the greatest of all time, maybe the second greatest of all time. What were your thoughts? Where'd you go with this?
Yeah, my thoughts were, good luck, Le'Veon. I understand there's a pretty significant age difference here, but there's also a pretty significant, I'd say age and experience and skill difference too. I think Le'Veon, good athlete, seems like a nice guy. But man, I don't know. I just don't think anyone who's like an amateur, like the people who should step into a ring against Mike Tyson, even at this age, you should be very careful. It's a very select group of people who should be willing to do that. I'm not sure Le'Veon Bell should be one of those people. I respect the initiative. I respect his courage. But man, I hope he's ready to take one, possibly many more hits before this is all said and done.
I don't think Le'Veon Bell, and I respect Le'Veon Bell. I've heard that he's not a bad boxer, that has some talent, has a lot of skill when it just comes to naturally being an athlete and is pretty quick with his feet, obviously. I don't think Le'Veon Bell's ever gotten hit by Mike Tyson with just one, even 58-year-old Mike Tyson. One hit, I just, no, not happening. Even a sparring match, unless you're tossing some headgear on there and you're going 75%, I don't think there's any shot that Le'Veon Bell walks out of this one feeling good about himself and feeling good about what he just did about Mike Tyson, nor remembering much, because Mike Tyson's going to smoke him. Jake Paul is probably in the same boat. I don't know anybody who's sitting around going, man, I hope Jake Paul wins. But I think a lot of people think Jake Paul will win against Mike Tyson. I don't think I'd hold that same notion against Le'Veon Bell. But look, if you want to shoot your shot, if you're Le'Veon, you're out here, you're just trying to make a headline, do your thing, man. Le'Veon Bell it's got to drive everything that he's done recently. Maybe Antonio Brown would walk out. Him walking out with Antonio Brown for the last one. Could you imagine that happening this time? And then Mike Tyson just walks out in a t-shirt because that's just what he does. Mike Tyson's not flash. There's no flash in Mike Tyson. Growing up in the Strackbine household, if I wanted to be flashy, if I wanted to, wear the crazy socks to football games or go buy the arm sleeve for basketball or whatever, my dad would simply sit me down and show me Mike Tyson YouTube videos about how everybody else walked in with the gold jackets and the mob around them, and then Mike Tyson just walked in just by himself, just chilling. Had his coach right there. There was no music, nothing. It was just Mike Tyson's coming in here to murder you, and he knows what he's doing, and I think that would be wild. So, not going to happen. Shout out to Le'Veon Bell. Way to shoot your shot, my friend, but play in a dangerous game because nobody wants to take a hit from Mike Tyson, especially built Mike Tyson, ready to go and ready to fight Mike Tyson. Other news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Former cornerback Steven Nelson announced his retirement after 9 seasons in the NFL, spent the last 2 years with the Houston Texans. I'll say this about Steven Nelson. I think he got a bad rep here in Pittsburgh. I think he was a better corner than people wanted to believe. I think that he was a bit of a scapegoat when it came to his time leaving the Steelers. They needed a cap casualty. They weren't going to get rid of Joe Hayden. They needed to get rid of somebody. Steven Nelson was the clear and obvious answer, so they moved on from him. But I thought he was a reliable corner for the most part during his time as a Steeler. I thought him and Joe Hayden and Mike Hilton played very well together. I liked that trio. Wish it didn't end on bad terms. He clearly made it worse by going on a podcast a couple of months ago or whatever and saying the Steelers still haven't found a corner. Since that podcast, they have found 3 corners, so I think they're okay. But I still think had a bad rep in Pittsburgh the way it ended, probably didn't need to be the way it should have ended.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a villain, but he's certainly not someone looked upon, I guess, favorably by Steelers fans after he left. He kind of did get the last laugh, I will say. I mean, beating the Steelers down in Houston last year and kind of dominating them. He had a pick in that game, and he made sure to let him know. So,
yep.
But I think when it's all said and done, if Steven Nelson comes back to Pittsburgh in 2-3 years or whatever, no one's really going to care. No one's really going to remember. I think he was good enough. He's a productive player for the Steelers, and even if there's a little tension at the end, I think that's all going to be water under the bridge eventually. I hope people have a better, I hope they remember Steven Nelson a little bit better than maybe they do after this past year, because he was a good player, man. He had some solid years here. It's just kind of a shame, like you said, that it kind of ended the way it did, because I don't know, it didn't deserve to go out like that,
No, I agree. I don't think that it should have ended the way that it ended. He clearly made things worse, and you got to fault people for that at the same time. But again, I thought he got a bad rep. I thought Steven Nelson was a pretty good corner when he was in Pittsburgh. And I think if he stuck around, they would have got a really, really a hard-nosed corner that fans would have liked, the team would have liked if they just stuck with them a little bit longer. But that's the business side of the NFL, and it doesn't always turn out pretty. So shout out Steven Nelson. Doesn't sound like he's really on his way out. He's already talking about a potential comeback. So
yeah, this just sounds like paternity leave. Like, I think I read something from like NFL.com where he was like, yeah, my wife's pregnant, so I'm going to retire, but I'll probably be back, quite honestly. So I don't think this is the last we've seen of Steven Nelson either.
No, I agree. All right, let's dive into some more Pittsburgh Steelers talk, some wide receiver talk, obviously a major topic of conversation for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Our own Jake Punturi tossed out a top 3 realistic wide receiver targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can find that at si.com/NFL/Steelers. Those targets, a bit shocking. Names that we have not mentioned yet, and names that, while they would be nice, maybe the word realistic isn't as realistic as we want it to be. Those names: Jahan Dotson, Washington Commanders; Jacoby Myers out of the Las Vegas Raiders; and then KJ Osborne out of the Minnesota Vikings. You read that story? You saw those names?
New England Patriot.
New England Patriots. Excuse me. New England, freshly signed to the New England Patriots. You look at all 3 of those names. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Look, I mean, so these are somewhat long shots, but I think every receiver option for the Steelers at this point is a long shot. So if you think they need to add an impact player, like, they're going to have to make a bold move to get one. So that's why I don't, really hate any of these names on this list. Jahan Dotson, I think, would be really interesting. I think he's got some speed. He's a little bit bigger too. I really like what he could bring there. I think the only problem is, like, Jacoby Myers had a couple good seasons, but he's kind of getting up there in age. Dotson's still relatively young. Like, Dotson should be like the kind of number 1 guy on this list. Like, this is the most intriguing one to me. I think that just in a vacuum, like, it would be a guy who could be kind of a game changer for them right away, and maybe even be a long-term option. He's been really good and looking like a pretty bona fide number 2 receiver. Like, you split up his numbers from the past 2 seasons, and I feel like that kind of production is absolutely perfect for what the Steelers would need. It'd be a trade that would, I don't know, it'd probably take you a 2nd-round pick or something. I feel like at this point, I feel like the Commanders are real happy with what they have, and you bring in a rookie quarterback. I feel like giving away weapons is usually not the move, especially with a guy who's just as young as, like, he's only been in the league for 2 years. 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, 2022 and 2023. So, like, the Steelers would have to make a real strong offer to pry Dotson away from the Commanders, I would think.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as a 3rd-round minimum that you're giving up for John, and then probably some, 3rd round and like a 3rd round next year, or a 4th round next year, maybe I don't know, something like a Kenny Pickett deal where once he plays X amount of snaps, it becomes a 2nd-round pick. But I think Jahan Dotson is a dude that makes a ton of sense for the Steelers. If it wasn't for the trade compensation, he's young, he's still on a rookie deal, he's got a ton of upside. I don't think he's even come close to reaching that upside. He's got all the speed that you're looking for. He could play inside and outside. He's a number 2 without threatening a number 1. That's what the Steelers are looking for. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's an interesting name, to say the least. Is it a realistic name? I don't know right now. I think it's going to be a lot tougher to pry him away from Washington than maybe people want to say. Jacoby Myers is an interesting one, but I don't think it's interesting right now. I think that it'll be a lot tougher to get him from the Raiders today than it will be come week 8, when the Raiders stink and their season's coming to an end, and Gardner Minshew isn't playing the way that they hoped that he played, or Aiden O'Connell's getting benched, or however they make that happen. I could see Jacoby Myers being a name that's on the trading block that the Raiders look at to say, look, let's see what we could get. Let's add some draft capital right now. At that point, I could see the Steelers making a move. I'm not upset about Jacoby Myers. I don't know how much money he costs, but I don't anticipate that he's a guy that is going to cost you $20 million a year. KJ Osborne, I thought, was a very realistic name in free agency. That being said, he just signed to the New England Patriots. So if that's the case, Juju Smith-Schuster is a much more realistic name than KJ Osborne, because they're just not going to give up KJ Osborne after just signing him and adding a quarterback to say that this is how they're going about things. And they're just, great deal, we'll move on. I don't think that one fits the bill either.
Yeah, I agree with you on Osborne. Like, I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think the Patriots would be willing to part with a guy that they literally just signed and haven't seen anything of yet.
Yeah, not one snap.
But I think I think the same thing about Myers too. Like, these are guys who, like, Osborne to a lesser extent, but I still think, like, Myers definitely falls into this range of, yeah, we're going to be on a bad team. Like, maybe we'll eventually want to blow it up if things don't look like they're heading in the right direction. It's not like Jacoby Myers is cheap either. Like, I think he's on like a $30 million deal. And he's supposed to make, like, his salary skyrockets next year up to like $10.5 million after like $5 million this year. So if you're
Yeah.
the Raiders, if you're just not interested in investing that type of money into a guy who's really not on the same timeline as you, because he's also 28 years old, and I feel like the Raiders, I don't know, and the Raiders in some ways, like, they have a bunch of stars, but also, a first year full time head coach, right? Like Antonio Pierce,
Mm-hmm.
um, in his first full year, like, you're going to need a quarterback eventually. You're going to have to hit the reset button eventually, and I just can't imagine that Jacoby Myers is part of that future long term. So I agree. Like, week 8, somewhere around the trade deadline, the Raiders looking a little desperate. They just want to offload this salary so they can kind of, like I said, hit the reset button, start over again. I think Jacoby Myers is, like I said, all these guys are, realistic only up to a certain extent. But I think of this list, it seems like Jacoby Myers might be the most immediately realistic guy of any of them.
I think that's an important conversation to have, is if the Steelers don't get a wide receiver right now, if they don't pull something off before the end of training camp or the start of the season, I wouldn't rule out them not pulling something off come week 8, of them seeing, hey, yeah, we have guys in Calvin Austin and Scotty Miller and Van Jefferson, but we need a little bit something more to put us over the edge so that we can make a playoff push and head into the playoffs with a really strong offense. That's when a wide receiver trade could still go down. That's still certainly on the table for them. If the Steelers don't get something done now, which I still think they do, I look at the Steelers as a team that's going to push for right now, for training camp during the dead time. I'm telling you, it's honeymoon season, which means that they're going to make a trade. While this is how they operate, people. You could say it, you could ask Steven, you could ask Nick. It happens every time. Without fail, it happens every single time. I expect that to happen. I could see week 7, week 8, the Steelers going out and saying, screw it, we need a wideout. And Jacoby Meyer fits that bill. There's probably a couple more guys that would fit that bill as well, but a trade deadline move to keep them afloat, to make sure that they make a really strong playoff push, would be another realistic timeline for when I would say a major trade goes down for the Steelers.
Yeah, and I think there will be a pretty significant sense of urgency during that first half of the season prior to the bye week and things like that. Like, I don't think the Steelers have to dominate, but they have to win pretty convincingly during that first half of the schedule and win a lot in order to make the second half bearable. We haven't done a schedule talk in a long time, but, like, keep in mind that back half is still pretty brutal. So any adjustments that you're going to have to make to power your way through that second half to make sure that what you've got going is sustainable, I think they're going to have to be proactive. I think they're going to have to think ahead a little bit. They're going to have to look at what they're doing right now and say, okay, we're going to have to be 50% better in the second half. If we're happy with where we're at weeks 1 through 8, we're going to have to be twice as good or whatever in the second half in order to keep things above board, to stay afloat in such a tough schedule, such a tough division. So I'm absolutely with you. I'm not counting out a wide receiver trade later in the season at all, but I am also on board with you. I think something happens before training camp. Like, I don't think they're going to sit on their hands for all of June and July and just say, maybe this all comes together, maybe it doesn't. I think they're going to be active and aggressive in making sure that they, have explored every avenue to making this team as good as possible. I think they're very interested in putting all of their eggs, not all their eggs, but a lot of their eggs in this basket this year.
That's where what we'll find out is they will be aggressive. Just like you said, they will call every avenue and see what all of their options are. It really could come down to if any of their options are realistic or if any of them pan out and play out in a scenario where they can make a trade happen. If they don't, that's when they'll go to the next step, which is them. But I agree. It's going to go, option A will be to find something right now. Maybe that something doesn't work out, and that's when we'll start talking about option B, which will be more towards the season. All right, we do head to minicamp tomorrow. Last week, before the break, before the long month of nothing, before we just waited out for what roster moves are coming for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what's to come during training camp, this will be the first time that we see all 90 guys on the field together in the South Side. Still not as much contact. Takes a little bit of a step forward, and you'll probably wear some shoulder pads one day or something, but still nothing full blown. we leave OTAs, 3 weeks of OTAs. We head to minicamp. We've already talked about everything we're looking at, and we'll have plenty of updates tomorrow and Wednesday and so on and so forth. We are 3 weeks in. What stands out about this team? What stands out about the Pittsburgh Steelers that maybe you were looking for or weren't looking for that has kind of slapped you in the face when it comes to what this team is, who this team is, and where this team could be going as we move forward?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is kind of the patience that they've had in terms of roster building. I think I don't know, we've talked all about their sense of urgency, their desire to not just get back to the postseason, improve on it. And I think at different points this season, it was like, okay, we have this long checklist of holes that the Steelers need to fill. They made their cuts, they made their roster moves, and here's what they need to do to make this roster perfect and competitive going into the next year. And they did it kind of piecemeal, piece by piece. They added the quarterbacks. They traded Deontay Johnson. They had Dante Jackson, but still, is that the move? Then they add Patrick Queen. Then they get Deshaun Elliott too. Then in the middle of OTAs they add Cam Sutton as well. You look at a lot of these holes that they have and used to have, they filled these very slowly, and every time that they seemed like they ran out of options or that there wasn't anyone that they could turn back to, no one left to sign to improve this roster, they kind of pull something out of their hats and they kind of figure something out. And I think watching it kind of come together on the field was pretty cool. I think Dante Jackson, people can have a lot more confidence in him than maybe they did before. I think the team has a ton more confidence. I think I have a lot more confidence in Dante Jackson. And then you add Cam Sutton in there. Obviously, that changes things as well. I've been talking about the receiver room, how I feel a little bit better about their pass catchers than I did before. And I think the next step is seeing when some pads come on and seeing how this offensive line shakes out. I think that's really the last kind of hurdle that you have to cross. Maybe a receiver comes or maybe it doesn't, but I think you can look at the progression of this team, the moves that they've made, the patience they've had, not saying, okay, we're going to reach for this receiver because we feel like we have to. We're going to reach for this big name corner or safety because we feel like we have to. They're finding guys who fit. They're finding their guys. They're finding guys who fit not only on the field but in their budget, and that's taken some time. But I feel like the longer that we've taken a look at this team, the better that they look, quite honestly. And I think that's testament just to how they build their roster and how they've done it kind of slowly and not in super flashy ways all the time. It's a lot of places that look really solid right now when I think you were expecting, massive names to come fill these holes.
I agree. I agree. I think that Omar Khan deserves a ton of praise, and I like that it's not all massive moves. I think when you look at teams of the past, you look at the team that always stands out to me is the Mark Sanchez Jets here, where they just added every superstar they could possibly get to come and join this team so that they can make a push for the playoffs. And it just didn't work. Like, they got to the playoffs. I think they lost to New England, I want to say,
that's
season.
A safe bet.
Yeah, it's probably is a safe bet. It was the Rex Ryan year, or one of the Rex Ryan years. It doesn't always work out the same way that it works out in the NBA or in the MLB. If you stack a team with a bunch of superstars in the NFL, sometimes it works. I think you need that missing piece. You need that Tom Brady. You need that Patrick Mahomes to lead and coordinate this group so that it works out the way that you want it to work out. The Steelers didn't do that. They went out and got a bunch of names that are really good, starting material, starters across the league that people are going to question, that they looked at and went, yeah, Dante Jackson, we'll get a lot of heat for that. We'll get a lot of heat for Deshaun Elliott instead of Justin Simmons.
Even Patrick Queen, like taking him away from Roquan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna get all these guys. The Steelers went out and got a collective group of guys that people looked at and said, I don't know if that's going to work. And it looks like it could work. Deshaun Elliott looks scary. Like, he's the one. Dante Jackson looks good. He looks fast. There's little worries for me with Dante. He just looks like a veteran starter in the NFL. That's who he looks like. Deshaun Elliott, every time I look at him, I go, dude, you are a freakish looking human being. Scary. Like, muscles have muscles. That should not happen. That's who Deshaun Elliott looks like. And it's across the board. And it's for 2 years now. It's Isaac Seumalo. It's Nate Herbig making some moves. It's Jeremiah Moon having an opportunity just to be outside linebacker 4. Like, that's who it's Van Jefferson impressing when nobody thought Van Jefferson would impress, or Scotty Miller coming through after all the heat he got. That I agree with you. I think that their patience and the way that they went about roster building massive this season. And that's all credit to Omar Khan. My biggest takeaway on this or through 3 weeks is the defense is going to be good, and we knew the defense was going to be good. I think the defense has an opportunity to do something crazy. I think the defense has an opportunity to be elite, if that's the word you want to use, one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL, maybe even better than that. There's just no holes on this defense that I look at and go, that's a concern. None. And even the ones that are concerning, they have options, and those options seem to be good. Down to who's going to be behind Cam Hayward. Dean Lowry is not a massive name. He's a good enough name. He's a reliable name. He's a dude who's got 80 starts in the NFL. That's a guy that I'm okay with having around. There are no holes, and because of that, there are minimal sleepers that we get to talk about, which is fine, but I'd rather minimal sleepers and elite defense, and that's where the Steelers are, and I don't think that there's a part of this defense that they've missed on. I think every single part, especially if Cam Sutton doesn't look at a massive suspension, it's a pretty complete defense and one that could be scary, scary good.
Yeah, it's not just it's not just no holes. It's depth too. You know, it's even if even if a hole does pop up because of an injury or something like that, or Cam Sutton suspension, I think there are guys who can step up and capably fill that role, at least in the short term. Like your backups, if you're the Steelers, are some of the better ones that they're in as good as situations as I think you can hope for. You know, I can't say they're the best backups in the league or anything, but I think you feel so confident about what those guys can do behind these stars, these top line guys that you got in free agency through trades, everything like that. You know, there's Peyton Wilson behind Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen. There's Darius Rush behind Joey Porter and Dante Jackson. There's, Keanu Benton, Dean Lowry,
Deontay KZ.
Yeah, DeMonte KZ. We'll see what DeMarvin Leal can bring this year. Like there's everything from top line starters to depth to guys who have some potential that you can experiment with a little bit too. Like it's a little boring on the defensive side of the ball, like you said, but that's a good thing, I think, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Exactly. It's boring. I thought that the other day. I was sitting around trying to come up with whatever I could come up with to either talk about or write or talk about on here, and it's just minimal. And what's going on? Why are we only talking about wide receivers and quarterbacks? The defense just looks that good, and they look scary good. And I think that's the thing, is if Darius Rush emerges, if Nick Herbig becomes a monster, like there are so many pieces to this defense that could be, if Cole Holcomb comes back healthy, there are so many pieces that you're not missing. And it's not, in years past, it was just fill the gaps. This year, just like you said, they constructed it in a way where everything fits, and this is a unit. And yeah, that unit could be elite. It could be very, and the thing is, TJ's been in Europe for like 3 weeks. Right. So we haven't even, scary TJ hasn't even shown up yet. Alex Highsmith looks ridiculous. Cam Hayward's been here for 2 days. Like, there's a lot of potential when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I think it could be pretty nuts. We'll see what happens. With that said, we're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, please go find all our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.